All right, so let's get started. All right, so math with business apps, here we go. All right, you note, what chapter are we starting on? 2. What's wrong with that?
It's chapter 2.
Yeah, what happened in chapter 1? Well, chapter 1, folks, I would like to think you already know. Chapter 1 starts like this.
Oh.
Okay, can I assume that you guys know how to do that? Please don't tell me it's 8. That would be bad. Right. Yes. So basically, the first chapter is kind of all about setting up the basic operations of math that I would like to believe you guys have all worked on. Now, just to be safe, I like to cover a couple of things that just you may not have had, you may not have been careful enough with. So 5 minus 1, we're okay with 4. But what happens if I do 2 minus 6? You should be able to handle negative numbers, folks, okay? You just have to. Now, in the business world, what do negative numbers mean?
We don't love it.
It means debt, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you owe, all right? So you are going to have to be able to deal with it. Now, how far is the government in debt, folks?
Billions.
Trillions. 20 trillion. That's our U.S. debt, folks. And one of the things that I like to do when I write this number is to remind you how the numbers go, right? Trillions, billions, millions, thousands, hundreds. Okay? If I ask you to deal with negative 4, you should be happy. Because I'm perfectly willing and able to talk about negative 20 trillion if you want, because that's a very real number that we have to deal with. Okay? So, just realize that that's that. And again, remember, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. Okay? And then it actually starts to get weird when you start to get past the trillions. There's quadrillions and quintillions, and then we start getting into weird, prefixes in order to get numbers that have more than 12 zeros or more than 18 zeros after them. Okay? But you should be able to deal with numbers like this if I ask. Now, what this also leads us to is being able to deal with numbers like this. This number, quarterly profit for BP, last quarter. Profit, not sales, profit. $42.5 billion. How do you put that number in your calculator?
Isn't your exponents doing that?
We could, but I don't want to deal with exponents. Just put the right number of zeros in it. How many zeros would there need to be in this number if you were to put it into your calculator? 9? 10? 5? I'm hearing lots of different numbers. Do I hear a number from the row? Do I hear 1? 11?
12.
How does it work, folks? What do you do to convert this to a real number?
Move the rest.
Okay, what happens to the decimal point? It becomes a comma, okay? And then whatever number is to the left of the decimal point is in this letter's place marker. So this is 42 billion. Now, if you've got numbers after the decimal point, write as many of them as you have. So in this case, we just have 1. Now, what's going to follow that 5? Zeros. And again, what follows billions? Millions, thousands, hundreds. Okay, so 8 zeros. This sort of stuff I expect you to be able to do as well. Okay, it's assumed that you would know how to put $42.5 billion in your calculator. Because you may need to divvy up this $42.5 billion of profit from BP to the 5 different C space O people that get all the money from the profits of a corporation, right? CEOs regularly get $10 million or $10 billion bonuses every year. This is where it comes from, right? So, now that you know, tell me how to write this number. Let's go with $4.75 million. How many zeros do I need on this number? 4. Good. Because you look at the decimal point, it becomes a comma. 750,000. Millions, thousands, hundreds. Okay? I'm going to expect you to be able to do this. I'm going to write problems that have numbers like this in them. Alright? And so you need to be able to deal with the T, B, and M, trillions, billions, and millions. Okay? And there are not a whole lot of businesses out there anymore, folks, where these numbers aren't the numbers you're working with in the business. Okay? If you've looked at what's happened in the business world over the last 6 or 7 years of this growth period, what's happened is that the big companies have gotten humongoloid bigger, right? They have bought up all the small businesses. That's what they've been doing. Because that's how you get profitable as a big company. You don't make stuff new, you just buy something new. Because you've got $42.5 billion of profit, you need to spend it somewhere, and that's how you do it. Right? I mean, think about what Google does. It buys Instagram, it buys, Tinder, it buys, that's what it does, right? And that's why. That's how it's making more profit. All right, so you are going to have to deal with these numbers. Please be ready. All right. Now, let's see. Oh, tell you what, we need a new page. All right. So how about this? How do we round numbers again? What would this be? Rounded to the hundreds. First off, what number is in the hundreds place up here, folks? Okay, good. Alright, so there are the hundreds. Now, how do I round that number correctly?
You look at the number to the right of it.
Look to the number exactly one space to the right, folks. Just one. Do not look more than one. I had a student one semester who, for some reason, thought he always was supposed to look at the last number and round accordingly. So if the last number was a 5 or more, he rounded every one of these up all the time. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out why he was rounding incorrectly. Until I finally saw enough of them in a row that I was like, oh! And then I explained it to him. All right? So, again, I just like to be safe. Make sure that you guys know when the number to the right it is 5 or higher, round up, convert all the numbers to the right afterwards to zeros accordingly. Okay? Alright. Not bad? Okay. Let me throw you some curveballs then. I like to do this to you so that your guys overheat brain-wise once. So what does it round to then?
So it just goes away.
Uh-huh.
There's no 5.
So what does it become then?
0.
There you go. Good. Rounded to the nearest 100,000, folks, this number is basically just 0, right? Where are the 100,000s up here? Yeah, here are 100,000s. Technically, what's that number? 0, right? We don't write it, but remember that technically there's as many zeros as we want to the left, just like after the decimal point, there's as many zeros as we want to the right. We don't write them very often, but remember, technically, they can be there if you want. It's no biggie. And so when you look at this number, and this is 4 or less, therefore we round down, everything becomes a 0 after it. It's just a whole bunch of zeros. It's just 0. It's one of those things where you're like, but that... Okay. And then you swallow it and say, yes, I agree. Right? But it does take a little wrapping your brain around it things. Okay? And this is another sort of thing that I like to do in this math class, is take things that you know obviously and remind you that you have to think every now and then when you get a weird answer to determine what the right answer is. Okay? So just be careful with that kind of stuff. All right, so rounding. And this one, just because it pisses me off sometimes, I'm not going to test you on this, but technically I really wish you guys could beat numbers correctly. If you were asked to read this number is 435,284,817. Did you ever hear me say the word "and" any time in there? Never. When you read whole numbers, folks, if there is no decimal point, you should never say the word "and." The only time you say the word "and" is when you have a decimal point. And note that what's happening in today's society, folks, what's happening is that a lot of our numbers are not being written by us writing in the number or typing it in on a keypad. We're reading them, right? We're reading it to the computer. Well, folks, computers are very, very literal. If you say 435 million and 284,817, the computer will try and put decimal points after you say the word "and." It just will. And so you need to be cognizant of the fact that the computer will do that to you. So if you are translating numbers to a computer, please be careful. Use that word "and" only at decimal point, okay? I'm not going to test you over that, so don't sweat it too terribly much, but it's just one of those things that you should know and remember, okay? All right, now, so the adding part you guys can handle, subtracting you can handle. What happens when we subtract negatives, though, folks? Right, what happened to the two negatives? They become a positive. What's 4 plus 5? No. All right. Again, what I like to tell students is think about this. When you do subtraction, you're taking things away. This negative sign means it's an IOU. Right? If you take away a $5 IOU and throw it away, you essentially just made $5, right? So your 4 pops up to 9. Okay? That's the idea behind it. Subtraction is always the taking away of something, and if you're taking away a bad thing, that means it was good. All right? Likewise, negative 9, right? This negative 4 means you owe somebody $4. Minus a 5, you're owing someone else $5. If you owe somebody 4 and somebody else 5, you're $9 in the hole. So look at these things and think of negatives as IOUs on a money scale. All right, that tends to make it a little bit more straightforward. Again, just be cautious to some degree. I like these because I'm a math guy. So when there's lots of negative signs floating around, I always take that one. All right. You owe somebody $4. You take away the fact that you owed somebody $3. So that means you got $3. If you owe somebody 4 and you get 3, you're still $1 in the hole. All right? Money, I will try as often as I can to make these things look like money. All right? Not bad subtracting? We'll come back to it a little bit more in chapter 2, just so that you know. One of the things I like to do just to be safe is show you all the different ways that 2 times 3 can be written. Those are all 2 times 3, every single one of them. Okay? It's just different ways to write it. Using a little x, it's really bad practice, folks, because of algebra. Right? What's our favorite variable letter? X. So when you write a little x for your multiplication, doesn't go over well. Using the dot or the star is a little bit better. Writing it like this as implicit multiplication would actually be best, in my opinion. All right? And yes, what is 2 times 3? Okay, good. Why? If you had to explain this to a 5th grader who doesn't know that negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, how would you explain it? Okay, but they don't know that yet.
Your dad just got multiplied by 3.
Okay, good. This is $2 in the hole, right? This is saying that you've got 3 $2 in the hole. If you have 3 IOUs of $2, how much are you in the hole? $6. So you basically go back and remember that multiplication is really the same as addition. All right? And once they see this, they'll start to see, oh yeah, a negative times a positive is a negative. And then likewise, 2 negatives. Negative signs are toggle switches. 1 negative sign turns it on, 2 turns it off because you flipped it twice. But if you multiply 3 negative numbers, you flip it on, you flip it off, you flip it back on, it's back to being negative again. All right? So you should be able to handle dealing with negative multiplication. And then likewise, just to be safe, the different ways that you can get division. Again, this is just a different format so that you know. Note that fractions, folks, they're not fractions. It's just division. All right? And what's 4 divided by 2? 2. And all of the same rules for the negative signs apply, right? So if I say, what's negative 6 divided by negative 2? 3, because there's 2 negative signs. One flips it on, the other one flips it off. And I mean that in the right way. And likewise, okay? So just realize that I expect you to know how to deal with integers, multiplication, division, add, and subtract. And that's more or less what you do in chapter 1. All right? And that's far enough for today. I don't want to necessarily get to chapter 2. But realize, folks, that here I will at least write the start of chapter 2. Chapter 2 will be all about fractions. So be ready on Tuesday to do some fractions for a while.